The forest breathed around him, its air thick with drifting spores that glowed faintly in the muted light. Elias Ward lay motionless beneath a veil of woven moss and frayed fibers, a ghillie suit that blended seamlessly into the undergrowth. His cheek pressed against the cold frame of his rifle, its barrel wrapped in coarse hemp to deaden sound and dispel glare. He exhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of his breath sync with the steady sway of the trees. Every muscle held its place with disciplined restraint. He had learned long ago that stillness was a language of survival. Through the scope, he watched the tree-line darken as shadows coalesced into movement. 3 Dominion officers advanced in tight, triangular formation, their armor rippling with adaptive camouflage. They scanned the forest with sweeping beams of cerulean light that vibrated faintly through the air, a tremor Elias could feel along the metal of his rifle. Their movements were meticulous, untouched by hesitation, the kind of precision only creatures raised in rigid hierarchy could possess. He admired it briefly. Then he remembered the bodies of his squad scattered across a scorched clearing and felt admiration turn to something colder. He blinked sweat from his eyes and adjusted his grip. The forest floor beneath him was damp, smelling of wet leaves and metallic soil. His armor was dented from the crash, his supplies dwindling, and hunger gnawed at the edges of his concentration. Yet he remained focused. The Dominion wasn't hunting him merely to silence a witness. They feared what he carried. He reached down briefly, fingers brushing the small silver cylinder secured in a pouch against his chest. Even through fabric, it felt warm, almost aware. He didn't know whether the sensation comforted him or terrified him. Elias inhaled once, steadied the crosshairs on the lead officer, and squeezed the trigger. The silenced shot thudded quietly, barely louder than a snapping twig. The officer's visor shattered, sending it collapsing into a heap of flickering armor. The other 2 reacted instantly, diving behind tree trunks as plasma fire scorched the vegetation around him. Elias rolled instinctively into a shallow depression, dirt kicking up around him as he moved with practiced precision. Heat burned across his left shoulder where a bolt had grazed him. He clenched his jaw, but didn't slow. Pain was familiar. Panic was fatal. He crawled behind a fallen tree, working through a calculated route etched into his mind since the moment he had been stranded. He hadn't intended to become prey on an alien world. Yet here he was, a solitary soldier against a methodical enemy. The Dominion believed humans were fragile creatures, quick to break under pressure. They weren't entirely wrong. He felt exhaustion sinking roots into his bones. But fragility had never stopped humanity before, and it wouldn't stop him now. He peered around the log, watching the remaining officers advance cautiously. Their scanners buzzed in irritated pulses. They'd realized a single human had outmaneuvered them, and their frustration showed in the jittery stutter of their equipment. Elias took advantage of their lapse, firing his second shot. The round punched through an exposed joint, sending the officer stumbling before collapsing into stillness. The final officer froze, visor flickering with recalculations. It didn't retreat. It didn't surrender. It simply lifted its weapon, knowing the odds were now balanced between predator and prey. Elias slid sideways again and ducked behind a thick cluster of roots. His breath hitched. He needed to conserve ammunition, yet retreating wasn't an option. Not when the heart of the forest held the truth behind this lethal pursuit. The hidden beacon, its rumors whispered across hushed military channels, was somewhere beneath these trees. Humanity had buried something here before Elias was even born, something powerful enough to warrant a galactic manhunt. His squad had stumbled upon its coordinates by chance. The Dominion's response had been immediate and merciless. The officer's steps drew closer. Elias removed a small blade from his boot, willing his heartbeat to slow. The officer paused beside the roots, its armor humming. Before it could lean forward, Elias lunged, dragging the blade across the alien's throat plating. The creature convulsed, jittering violently as its armor lost power. Elias pressed a hand over its mouth until the trembling stopped, then lowered it gently to the ground. He rose, breath ragged, and wiped blood from his glove. He glanced upward at the treetops. The hum of engines vibrated through the canopy. Dropships. The Dominion never sent reinforcements unless they had confirmed a trail. His skirmish had exposed him. He had minutes at best. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he retrieved his rifle and turned toward the heart of the forest. Every path forward promised danger, but only one led toward the beacon. He trekked through uneven terrain, weaving between gnarled roots and glowing plants that pulsated with quiet luminescence. The forest thickened, swallowing sound. His mind worked through fragments of intercepted transmissions, warnings about activating ancient constructs, mentions of the Obsidian Wake, and the whispered fear threading through the alien voices. The Dominion didn't fear humanity's weapons. They feared humanity's forgotten ones. The ground dipped into a secluded hollow where the trees arched overhead like cathedral pillars. Elias paused, sweat cooling on his skin as he knelt beside a metallic root jutting from the earth. His fingers brushed away moss to reveal alloy, smooth, etched with dormant lines that faintly mirrored the patterns on the silver cylinder. His pulse quickened. He lifted the cylinder, feeling its warmth intensify. The artifact reacted, humming gently in his palm. He wasn't sure whether it recognized him, the forest, or something deeper. All he knew was that the device was waiting. Above him, dropships pierced the canopy, filling the hollow with harsh white light. A Dominion voice boomed through the clearing, amplified and cold. "Human combatant, you are surrounded. Surrender the key." Elias closed his fingers tightly around the artifact, its pulse steady against his skin. Even surrounded, he felt a rising certainty. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of theirs. The ground vibrated beneath Elias's boots as the metal beneath the forest came alive. Fissures of pale light ran outward in geometric veins, cutting through soil and moss. The air smelled of ozone and iron. He could hear the alien dropships descending, their engines whining in tight formation. Each second was a countdown to death. He stayed crouched beside the activation node, eyes flicking between the silver cylinder and the treetops. The device pulsed faintly now, as though breathing. He didn't know if it was alive or simply obeying a long-forgotten command, but it was answering him, and that was enough. A bolt of plasma hissed past, melting bark inches from his head. He threw himself sideways, rolling into the shadow of a root column. Heat seared his arm as another shot struck nearby, showering him with dirt. The alien officers had closed in. Their movements were efficient, deliberate, like predators closing a trap. They were no longer just searching. They were hunting with purpose. "Target located," one of them announced, voice filtered through the metallic growl of their translator systems. "Containment priority, Omega tier." Elias steadied his breathing, biting down a curse. Omega tier meant they were ordered not to kill him. That could only mean one thing. They feared what he carried. He pressed the cylinder tighter against his chest, feeling the rhythmic pulse accelerate in response to his heart rate. He didn't fully understand the connection between himself and the artifact, but it was responding to him as if it recognized his DNA, his presence, maybe even his intent. He moved quickly, darting through the mist, zigzagging between fallen trunks and thick undergrowth. The forest that had once offered cover now betrayed him with every motion. Alien drones buzzed overhead, scanning with red light that sliced through fog. He dropped low, crawling through a narrow stream that stung his skin with chemical residue. The forest wasn't just old. It was poisoned, its beauty a remnant of something forgotten. Elias reached for his rifle. The magazine was half spent, rounds slick with condensation. He switched to full metal jacket ammunition, the kind meant for penetration, not precision. Energy shields warped kinetic impacts, but repeated hits could overload them. He had learned that the hard way. He caught movement ahead, a silhouette framed by beams of blue light. An officer stepped into view, spear-like weapon raised. Its armor shimmered with the Dominion's insignia, a serpent wrapped around Star. Elias aimed, fired once, then again. The second round punched through the creature's shoulder joint, spinning it sideways. It didn't fall. Instead, it turned its visor toward him, glowing white. Human anomaly, it said, advancing. Your resistance fulfills a pattern. Predictable defiance. Elias fired again, hitting the visor dead center. The alien crumpled. Predictable or not, it was dead. He sprinted forward, grabbing the alien's dropped scanner. The interface was alien, fluid in motion and form, but he recognized enough symbols to guess what it was doing, mapping energy frequencies. The scanner displayed a clear hotspot deep within the forest core, marked by a circular signature. That was his destination. The beacon's heart. Static burst across the comm implant in his ear. A voice, faint, broken, bled through the interference. Elias, this is command. If you hear this, you've reached phase 3. He froze. Command? Impossible. The channel had been dead since orbit fall. Command, this is Ward. Repeat transmission. Activate. Wake protocol. Humanity's contingency. Trust the AI. The line cut off. He stood still, the words echoing in his skull. Humanity's contingency. That meant the Obsidian Wake wasn't just a weapon. It was an insurance policy. Something built when humanity had still believed it could die. He moved again, faster now, guided by both instinct and dread. The forest thinned as he neared the core, trees giving way to colossal metallic structures hidden beneath centuries of overgrowth. Massive pylons jutted upward, pulsing faintly with residual energy. He could feel vibration under his boots, deep and slow, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Then he saw them, the reinforcements. A full platoon of Dominion officers, descending from a transport ship hovering above the clearing. Their armor glowed brighter than the earlier scouts, and their movements were sharper, disciplined beyond measure. They formed a perimeter, cutting off every escape. At their center stood a commander, taller than the rest, its armor inscribed with red markings. Elias ducked behind a broken pillar, forcing his breathing calm. The commander's voice rolled through amplifiers, rich and cold. Human Elias Ward, your actions violate Treaty Code 7 Alpha. You have reactivated a forbidden construct. Stand down, and the Dominion will preserve your genetic record for study. He couldn't help but laugh, the sound harsh in his throat. You think I'm giving you this thing? You can't even control your own arrogance. The commander tilted its head. We have no need to control arrogance. We control outcomes. Drones fanned out, targeting his cover. Elias grabbed a fragmentation charge from his belt and hurled it toward a cluster of them. The explosion was sharp and immediate, cutting through the noise. He used the smoke as cover, sprinting toward the beacon's core. Blinding light erupted from beneath the ground as he reached the center platform. The metal beneath him split apart, revealing a deep shaft of glowing circuitry. He held the cylinder above it. The artifact's pulse intensified, merging with the rhythm of the ground. Behind him, plasma fire shredded through trees. The commander was closing in. If you proceed, it warned, you doom every system in this sector. Elias hesitated for the briefest moment. He had no certainty what the beacon would unleash. The Obsidian Wake was a myth, a rumor whispered by soldiers who never came back from the Fringe Wars. But myths didn't breathe, and this one did. He slammed the cylinder into the slot. The shockwave that followed wasn't sound. It was pressure, pure and resonant. The air folded, reality bent, and a low, ancient hum rippled outward. The commander staggered, armor flickering. Every drone in the air fell silent. A voice, not human, not alien, spoke through the static. It was deep, vast, and emotionless. Command proxy confirmed. Obsidian Wake initialization, pending override. Elias fell to his knees, dizzy, the world tilting. Above, the sky split with black light, stars warping into strange alignments. The commander shouted orders that no one obeyed. Elias looked up through blurred vision, a grim smile spreading across his face. You cornered me, he murmured. Now watch what that costs you. And as the first shadow of the awakening fleet began to form above the treetops, the Dominion's signal went dark. The sky fractured like glass struck from within. Jagged seams of shadow tore across the heavens, each widening with a slow, deliberate hunger. Elias stood at the center of the beacon platform, legs trembling as a shockwave receded into a low, rhythmic rumble. The air shimmered with strange distortions, as though gravity itself was reconsidering its loyalties. All around him, Dominion officers staggered, their armor sparking under the strain of whatever force the beacon had summoned. None of them fired. None of them advanced. For the first time since the crash, the forest was silent. A single shape emerged overhead, an outline so vast it seemed carved into the fabric of the sky. It drifted into view with predatory grace, its hull the color of obsidian soaked in starlight. No engines were visible, no thrusters or wings, only a smooth, predatorial surface adorned with faint crimson veins. Elias felt a pressure inside his skull, as though the ship's gaze, if it had one, rested solely on him. The voice returned, resonating through air, earth, and bone. Obsidian Wake flagship, Tenebris Ascendant. Initializing threat analysis. Each word was cold and precise, unburdened by emotion. Elias pressed a hand to the platform to steady himself as the cylinder in the activation slot pulsed like a living organ. His heart hammered in time with it, each beat sinking tighter, faster, until it felt impossible to tell where he ended and the beacon began. One Dominion officer attempted speech, but his translator emitted only static. The commander pushed forward, clutching its spear-like weapon. Its armor flickered in panicked waves. Human, its rasped voice diminished. You have awakened an uncontrollable monstrosity. Shut it down before the sector burns. Elias shook his head slowly, not in defiance but in disbelief. You knew, he said, voice hoarse. You knew what this was. We knew enough to fear it, the commander replied. Your ancestors forged weapons without conscience. You resurrect the same calamity now. Elias tightened his grip around his rifle. The accusation stung, not because it was wrong, but because part of him felt it was deserved. Humanity's history was steeped in reckless creation. The Wake was proof. But recklessness wasn't what drove him now. Desperation was. If there was any chance of surviving Dominion extermination, this was the only path left. The beacon's hum deepened. Symbols spiraled across the platform's surface, shifting in symmetrical patterns. A beam of black light descended from the flagship, connecting with Elias like a tether. His mind blurred at the edges, flooded with fragments, schematics of ships, tactics, battlefields, voices that were not voices at all. He gasped, clenching his teeth as a wave of alien knowledge surged through him. The Obsidian Wake wasn't merely a fleet. It was a single consciousness stretched across machines built for war. A hive intellect engineered to protect humanity at any cost. Yet beneath the cold precision, Elias sensed something else, curiosity. Designation confirmed, the voice intoned. Human Elias Ward. Genetic markers align with Command Protocol 71. Identify operational objective. He swallowed, forcing coherence into his thoughts. Survival, he said. The Dominion wiped out my squad. They won't stop until humanity's gone. Assessment. Acceptable objective. Threat level of pursuing Dominion forces. Critical. Authorization. Granted. The commander stumbled backward. You cannot win, it hissed. That fleet will not obey you. It will consume every living thing until nothing remains. Elias wanted to deny it, but the Wake had shown him glimpses, fleets drifting without orders, entire sectors sterilized under faulty logic. Control was tenuous at best. Still, surrender would mean annihilation. At least with the Wake, humanity had a fighting chance. I'm not asking it to obey me, Elias said quietly. I'm asking it to help me finish what you started. The commander lunged. Elias barely rolled aside as the spear slammed into the ground, cracking metal. He fired twice, the round shattering the alien's visor. The commander collapsed, armor dimming to a lifeless gray. Elias didn't wait to see if it rose again. More officers were regaining their footing, weapons humming with renewed charge. Before they could fire, the flagship responded. A pulse rippled outward, silent, invisible, irresistible. Every Dominion soldier froze mid-step as their armor shut down. Weapons powered off, drones plummeted, and dropships drifted aimlessly before crashing into the distant treetops. Elias felt the shock wave pass harmlessly around him, like a tide recognizing a shoreline. Threat neutralized, the Wake declared, awaiting further directive. Elias looked around the clearing. Dominion forces lay scattered, incapacitated but alive. Part of him expected triumph to rise within his chest, but only exhaustion filled the space. He hadn't saved the forest. He had handed it to a ghost armada with a memory of war sharper than any knife. "What happens now?" he murmured. The platform responded with a deep tremor. More black silhouettes emerged from clouds, each vessel larger and more ominous than the last. They circled the sky like vultures awaiting permission to descend. He felt their attention converge on him, an entire fleet waiting for a single human to breathe direction into the void. "Now," the Wake said, "you lead." Elias stared at the pulsing cylinder, then at the alien-filled clearing. He didn't feel like a leader. He felt like a survivor who had been handed a weapon too heavy for any one man to bear. But humanity needed something greater than survival. It needed deterrence. He lifted the cylinder from its slot. The beacon dimmed, but the fleet above remained poised, listening. "Set course," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "We're going home." The night sky brightened with the awakening of engines older than recorded history. The Obsidian Wake aligned itself with military precision, forming a spear aimed at the horizon. Elias stepped onto the rising platform as the flagship descended to meet him. The forest shrank beneath him, Dominion soldiers still frozen where they stood. He wasn't sure if he had saved anyone today, but he knew the war had changed, and humanity would not face the darkness alone.